Hi, friends. The 2024 presidential election is just days away. I think it's one of the most important elections of my lifetime. Since so much is at stake for women, I thought this could be a great time to interview the executive director of California's League of Women Voters, Stephanie Doute. Stephanie has been leading the California League for the past 5 years with the focus of increasing the league's impact in advocacy and the voter education. She believes in elevating women's voices to make a more perfect democracy. Please welcome Stephanie Doute. Hi. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it that you're gonna be on the So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank
Um,
you. Thank you for the invitation.
you're welcome. I'm really excited.
Me too.
Can we start with the first question? Is that okay with you?
Sure, sounds great.
The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 during the suffrage movement after the 19th Amendment was signed. As the executive director of the California League of for the past 5 years, how do you feel about leading women voters at one of the most pivotal moments in history for women in the 2024 election?
Oh, thank you, Nicole. That is a great question and something, sort of at the heart of why I do this work. I would say that, first of all, the League of Women Voters isn't just focused on women, and we aren't just made of women. Yes, the League was born of the women's suffrage movement, but there are people of all genders involved with the League of Women Voters, and we focus on voters and issues that are not just quote unquote women's issues. We focus on voters across the spectrum, and we work with and for voters across genders and ideologies and points of view, religious background, racial background. We work with all voters. So, it's really exciting to be in such a diverse organization that is working with as many people as we can. That said, the League was built on almost 100 years of women's unpaid labor in communities to educate people, to bring people to the polls, to register voters. And we're still now a grassroots organization, and we have thousands and thousands of members across the state, putting in thousands and thousands of hours every election cycle to bring nonpartisan, unbiased information to voters, to be in the communities, talking to voters, bringing that kind of information, delivering it in plain language and translated, and what people need to be able to cast their ballots. You asked me how I feel about leading in this moment, and I would say it's never about me. And it really shouldn't ever be about me. It's about all of the amazing democracy warriors, women, and people of all genders who work with the League every day to get people the information they need to go out and cast the ballot that best aligns with their values. But am I proud? Absolutely, you bet. I'm proud of the League, and I'm proud of the work that we and our members and our partners do. I'm proud to stand on the shoulders of giants, the women who came before us and fought these battles, and, to carry that torch forward to building participation in our democracy and to creating a government that's more representative and that better serves the people who live here, carrying that forward to build a better California and a better US. And yes, I am proud in this moment to be working on these things.
I really appreciate your answer. Um, with the election just days away, I know that the League is a nonpartisan organization that doesn't endorse presidential candidates. I noticed a social media ad from the US League that said there could not be a more critical movement to empower women voters, highlighting equal pay and reproductive rights, with Trump and Vance being such controversial candidates who are threatening women's rights. Has the League of Women Voters had talks of changing that policy?
So what I'll say to that is that the League is a nonpartisan organization. We do not take stances on political parties or candidates. I think that having nonpartisan organizations in a society that is as polarized as we are right now is really, really critical, because there has to be a place for people to get information that is not coming from a political party, that is not coming from a candidate. It's really, really important that there are organizations like ours out here who are trying to bring real information, who are trying to bring facts so that voters can make an informed decision. You know, the ability to be able to speak to and with people with differing opinions and differing points of view is really important. And so I think it's critical that organizations like the League continue to walk in this space. We are still a political organization, though we are nonpartisan, and we do have positions on women's rights and voting rights and democracy, immigration and civil rights. And so when we act on those positions that the League has studied over decades. And we try to advance good policy that will build a more equitable California for all who live here. And I think that's a really important place for the League to be.
Thank you for that amazing answer. There's a lot right there. So I really appreciate what you just said, and I agree what you just said about reproductive rights and everybody in a whole. And there's a lot to talk about.
There is a lot to talk about.
Yeah. So I really appreciate your answer. So thank you. If we see a Trump presidency, do you believe that the clock on women's rights will be turned back? And are you preparing for what if scenario?
So I'll start by saying, because of we are a nonpartisan organization and what I just said, I'm not going to offer any opinion on a potential Trump or Harris presidency. But we have already seen a rollback of women's rights with SCOTUS ending protection for reproductive rights. We hear now, in far more normalized ways than maybe ever in our lives, conversations that attempt to justify violence against women. We hear what people validate as legitimate political discourse, the idea of the reversal of the 19th Amendment and rescinding women's right to vote, or only giving women the right to vote if they've had children. We are living through a moment where the dehumanization of women is a reality. And I guess, you know, for me, I never imagined a time in my life that I would live through this, being a part of the political discourse. I mean, for some women, they can remember a time in their lives that they couldn't get a credit card or a home loan without permission of their father or their brother or their husband. I mean, some of us have lived through that. And some of us haven't. And so for those of us who haven't, that history feels really far away. Sort of like with civil rights and the desegregation of schools, that is recent history. People that we know and love lived through it. The history is not so far away. It's really, really so close. And if we don't honor it and learn about it and learn from it and commit to being better together, are we doomed to repeat it? I believe we have a lot of work to do, but I wouldn't and couldn't do this kind of work if I didn't have a deep sense of hope for what I think we can accomplish together as humans to better society for all of us. I mean, in terms of planning what ifs, so should we be? Should we be planning what ifs as humans and as organizations? Yes, we should all be planning our what ifs. You know, what do you want to do to mitigate your what ifs, right? What do we all want to do? Step one is to vote. Vote right now and take 5 friends. That's how we choose the what ifs for our future. We use the power we have in our vote. And it's not just about who's elected president, right? Um, it's about who's on our school boards. Those are the people who are making decisions about book banning. And it's about who's on our city councils. It's about how we mitigate misinformation and malinformation, how we strengthen civics education for kids in schools, and to teach them how to participate in our democracy and how our democracy actually works. So when they go out there in the world and they're able to be a part of it, they know how it works. It's how we relearn to talk to each other, to value the facts over sort of that juicy insider satisfaction feeling of conspiracy theories that it feeds, a piece of some people that are like, well, I know more, I know better because I've got this insider conspiracy information. It's how we learn to re-talk to each other. It's how we hold elected officials accountable after they're in office to truly be public servants. So for the League, our mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. So we look at a lot of potential eventualities and say, if this is our mission, and this is how the world looks, A, B, C, D, E, these potential different ways the world looks, what work will we need to do? And how will we need to show up to deliver on our mission in line with our values in each of these potential eventualities? And I think for all of us, we should be looking at how do we need to show up to live our values and to build the future that we want to be a part of. So yes, I think looking at all those things matters, and it matters kind of no matter whether you're an organization or a person, just living your life.
I love that part, living your life. That's what I do every day. Um, I'm going to the next question. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Okay. Polls show that more women than men have registered to vote and voted in the election since 1964. I hope women will show up and force and make a statement. However, there have been 5 president elections in our history where the Electoral College voted in a one of the term in 2016. Why hasn't the Electoral College been removed already?
Okay, how much time do you have? Because I love this subject.
Uh,
So the electoral system is in the Constitution, right? It's not that simple to just remove it. Um, and about every 4 years, people start to care about it. So one of the tricks to changing the electoral college system will be for us to care about it more often than every 4 years. So that will be step one. But there are 2 ways to change the Constitution in our country, and this is a constitutional issue. The first way is by a 2/3 vote of both the House and the Senate to propose a constitutional amendment, which then has to be ratified by 3/4 of state legislatures. The second way is by a constitutional convention called for by 2/3 of state legislatures. So we have already talked a little bit about how polarized our society is. That is a lot of people that you have to get to concur to make a change in the Constitution. And if we're being realistic, power loves to hold on to power. So imagine what it would take in today's society to get that many people with power to agree to take an action that could at some point potentially weaken their power either now or in the future. I mean, for me, it seems almost impossible to imagine a short-term elimination of the Electoral College. That doesn't mean it's not worthwhile work, but it does mean that it's not easy. And yet, I fully believe that some of the hardest things we do are the most important. So, I mean, I think that the Electoral College is absolutely a racist relic of the world as it existed to convince slave states to sign the Constitution, and it continues to only serve to disenfranchise voters. Like you pointed out, Nicole, we've had 5 presidents who did not win the popular vote. So I took a look in preparing for this conversation. I took a look at the National Popular Vote website, and it's interesting to think about it in this way. In 2004, if 59,393 voters in Ohio had changed their mind, only voters in Ohio, President Bush would have lost, despite leading nationally by over 3 million votes. In 2020, if 21,461 voters had changed their mind, Joe Biden wouldn't have taken office, despite leading by over 7 million votes nationally. And each of those 21,460 voters, it would have been 5,229 in Arizona, 5,890 in Georgia, and 10,342 in Wisconsin. So it's really interesting that each of those votes was 29 times more important than the 7 million voters elsewhere. That means every vote is not equal under our current system. And the league really believes in one person, one vote. All of our votes should count equally. So we're working hard on abolishing the Electoral College and passing the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact in the interim. Every person's vote should count the same, whether you live in Georgia, Arizona, California, Maine, Hawaii, or any other state, no matter where you live. One person, one vote, all counting the same. The League of Women Voters of the United States did some research and discovered that if we had a popular vote that took the presidency, candidates would need voters. They would need to campaign in 36 to 39 states to get the votes they would need to win a popular vote. And that's super interesting because now it's just a handful of swing states where they need to capture a few voters to swing the entire election. So if we can't change the Electoral College in short term, what do we do? Because the problem's not going to go away. And do we have decades to wait? We don't have decades to wait. So we're working on the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. It's a more short-term solution to the problem of the Electoral College electing presidents who did not win the popular vote. So under that, the states that have signed on would cast their electoral votes to the candidate who won the national popular vote, not the candidate who won their state, who won the national popular vote. So the compact would become active when enough states have signed on to get to the requisite 270 electoral college votes needed to win the presidency. And all of our votes would count equally, one person, one vote. So as of now, about 17 states have enacted the National Popular Vote Compact, totaling 209 electoral votes. So there's more work to be done to get to the 270 that we need. I just think about how powerful it would be if our candidates had to truly serve and speak to every voter in every state, how much more voice we would have, how much more impact and empowerment we would experience as voters, and how much it might feel more powerful to cast our ballot in some places in the presidential election if we knew that our votes all counted the same. So I agree with you, Nicole, that the Electoral College is a challenging situation, and the league agrees that there's change needed. And that's why it's one of our strategic priorities looking to the future. Sorry, I told you I could go on and on about the Electoral College.
I see how excited you are about this topic.
I love this topic because, one of the best things about democracy is that it should empower us all to have voice. It should give us all equal power to create the future that we want to live in, and that we want our kids or our grandkids to live in. And that means that our votes should all count the same. Like, I truly believe in the power of democracy, and one vote, one voice, one person, one vote gets us there. It gets us so that we have equal power in building that future that we want to live in. And that is why I get so enthusiastic about it, because I really think that as we look at a country that's both polarized, but increasing in diversity and increasing in diversity of thought, creating space for all of that diversity of thought to have voice is really important.
In terms of California election, there are 10 propositions on the ballot. What is the best way for people to get information about them to make an informed decision?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because some of the times we get things on our ballots that feel really complicated because they are really complicated. And it's difficult to feel like an expert on this thing that I'm being asked to vote on. Um, in the past, it's been kidney dialysis, and we've got a Medi-Cal funding ballot measure and many others that there's a lot there. There's a lot of important and nuanced information behind it, and we're being asked to make educated choices about the future of these things. So I would say, and we're being bombarded with misinformation all the time for, with folks who want us to do one thing or another, and sometimes we'll say whatever they think they need to say to get us to do that thing, whether it's true or not. That's the society that we currently live in. So finding trustworthy information is really important. And I think that's one of the places that the league shines. We study these ballot measures deeply, and then we produce a couple of materials that are available for voters. We produce the Easy Voter Guide, which is a plain language ballot measure explainer. And you can find it at cavotes.org. We work with adult literacy learners on the Easy Voter Guide to make sure that it is understandable. The information is understandable, regardless of your educational background and educational attainment, so that everybody has the information they need in ways they can understand. That will allow them to go cast a ballot. We also are on the ground in communities. So we're bringing leagues across the state are having community forums on these ballot measures to give people the information and give them a chance to ask questions. And these are unbiased ballot measure explainers, and let people right in their communities ask the questions and say, well, I'm wondering about this and I'm wondering about that. And they have a plethora of well-studied material to help bring that information to voters right where they live. We also have Vote 411, which is an online ballot measure, an online ballot planner. So you can find your candidates and information on your candidates in their own words, and ballot measure information there. I think that one of the places the league is really strong in delivering for California voters is trying to make these ballot measures understandable so that we all can make educated decisions on complex topics that we're not experts on, but that we get to have a say in. So I would recommend that voters look for these kind of nonpartisan studied pieces of information, and we keep it all at cavotes.org, and that's a great place for folks to go.
I have another question for you. What actions that the league have taken to make voting more accessible for people with disabilities or language barriers?
Yeah, the league does a lot of work on these things. We also are really embrace the concept of nothing about us without us. And so we work hand in hand with partners like Disability Rights California, Asian Law Caucus, NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials Educational Fund, to work on some of these issues, because we really think that working in coalition and with communities is really, really important. One of our goals is to build a more equitable California for all who live here, and to build an electorate that is representative of the people who live here, so that the folks elected can truly represent and serve the diversity of our population. So I'll go through just a couple of the bills we've worked on. there are many ways we do this, but I'll tell you a couple of the bills we've worked on. In 2023, we supported a bill to require all in-person voting locations to offer curbside voting, display prominent signage about the availability of access options, and establish a method for a voter with a disability to contact a poll worker in order to vote outside at that curbside voting location. In 2022, we co-sponsored a bill building safeguards to prevent erroneous voter registration purges and to protect voting rights of people with disabilities under conservatorship. We worked on the design of the DMV motor voter system to ensure that it's accessible to people with disabilities and people whose first language is not English. We advocated for provisions in the Voters' Choice Act to promote language and disability access, including the creation of the required Language Access Advisory Committee and the Voting Access Advisory Committees. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. This is actually super high priority for us. We create our voter education materials in as many languages and with as much access as possible, you know, whether it's to be accessible to screen readers or to folks who have different educational attainment or who need to hear it in an audio format. You know, we try to make sure that all of that's available. We do test the Easy Voter Guide with adult literacy learners so that we know people with different backgrounds can understand the information so they can decide and go cast a ballot. We've long advocated for county elections offices to collaborate with community-based organizations for more and better in-language and accessible voter education and outreach. We worked on the Voter Bill of Rights, the Voter Guide Best Practices Manual. I mean, this is sort of a core piece of work that the League does is through both our work on the ground in communities and reaching voters where they are to the legislative and the policy and the advocacy work behind that it takes to build the systems that make voting accessible. So I'm so glad you asked because this is really important work that we do and it's a core piece of our voting work.
I really appreciate your dedication and what you just said. So thank you so much. As a new California law prohibits countries from requiring voters to show ID to cast their ballot, what is the League point of view on the new law?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So the League of Women Voters of California supported this bill. We think it's very important that we have safeguards in place that prevent the disenfranchisement of voters. There's a lot of mis and disinformation out there about our elections, and there's a lot of efforts to sow more mis and disinformation and to make people have less trust in our elections. And so we supported this bill. We stand on the principle that the right to vote should not be nullified by needless voter identification laws because California law is well constructed to balance the need to safeguard the voting process while minimizing unnecessary burdens on voters. I mean, to register to vote in California, a person has to provide a driver's license number, their state identification number, the last 4 digits of their social security number. If they don't, include that identifying information with their registration application, then they do have to provide identification the first time they vote in a federal election. And there are a plethora of acceptable options to use. And that, you know, and each person who votes in person at the polls declares their name and their current address and signs the roster, or if they're unable to sign, they have another person sign on their behalf. So there are so many safeguards built into our election system already. I mean, signature verification, if we mail our ballots in, you know, it has to match the signature on file. So there are so many safeguards in place that these voter identification laws are really built to disenfranchise voters. They're built to keep people from voting, and that is not what we're about. We are about walking that line of safe and secure elections and not putting needless blocks in front of people. And so we absolutely support this new law, and we're thrilled that it passed. So,
Okay.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, folks, go vote. Um, if you don't have a driver's license or you don't have a state ID card or you're not carrying a passport, if you are registered to vote, go and vote. You do not need those things to show up. Not in California.
Thank you so much for sharing. As an advocate, I think it's important for people to get involved in shaping policy to create the change we want to see in the world. How can people get involved in the League of Women Voters in California?
I'm so glad you asked that. There are so many ways to get involved, and I agree with you, Nicole. I think that it is critical for people to get involved in shaping the policy to create the better world. And I also think it's important that they get involved in holding their elected officials accountable once they're in office, to doing what they need to do to serve us as public servants. So there's lots of ways to get involved with the League of Women Voters. And the first and best way is that we have local leagues all across the state in communities. And local leagues are doing all kinds of amazing work, whether it is, educating voters on the ground with community forums and candidate forums, or working on sheriff oversight committees to provide oversight of sheriffs, or working on voter registration in jails, or working on local policies or implementing state policies at the local level. There is an immense amount of opportunity to get involved in your local league. And we have a list of our local leagues on our website at lwvc.org. The league is an interesting place because we're a multi-issue intersectional organization. So there's something, for most people in the league. We stand firm in our values of equity, of human rights and civil rights and voting rights. And if you can align with those values, there's something for a passion that you can follow in the league. We work on climate change. We work on criminal justice reform. We work on voting rights. We work on health, women's rights, and healthcare, women's healthcare. So you can find a way to follow your passion in the league. And the best place to get started is getting involved with your local league and getting on the ground in your community. Going to city council meetings, talking to your elected representatives. Leagues are shaping that. They are bringing all of that to folks. And I think that's a fantastic opportunity. And so I think that's where you start. That's where you start with the league. We are thousands and thousands strong in this state, and there's room for more. There's room for everyone because the work is never done. We always have to grow. We always have more to do, and there's space for people here. So I would say let nothing hold you back. If you align with these values of equity in California and the work that we're trying to accomplish to building a more equitable future in all of California, you are welcome and you are wanted to be part of the work in the league to build this future.
Thank you so much for coming on to the No Show. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun, and I really appreciate the opportunity that you give me to talk about all these things that I love so much.
You're welcome.